I want to just briefly address an issue that we agreed to talk about, but maybe doesn't take a long time to talk about. You mentioned the Magnuson-Stevens Act, not Magnuson-Stevenson, but Magnuson-Stevens Act. I think, Leigh, you're the person who has that's a pet peeve of yours.
I did tweet about that.
Yeah, I recall that. So talk to me a little bit about the chances. It's up for reauthorization, has been for a while. It's not gotten reauthorization. Will it get reauthorization in the next session of Congress? Does it matter if it gets reauthorization? What's your thinking on that?
Sure, great question. So like you said, MSA, Magnuson-Stevens, MSA, same thing. We just shorten it, has been up for reauthorization since 2010. There have been reauthorization efforts since then, sort of in fits and starts, but we have yet to see a bill that really sort of has the consensus necessary to make it across the finish line. I'm of the opinion that MSA reauth is less dependent on who ends up in the White House and more dependent on sort of the appetite of the House and the Senate and their ability to find common ground amongst all these various fishing stakeholders. And just sort of as a quick snapshot of kind of where we have been in the past couple years. In 2018, we saw Rep. Don Young, Republican from Alaska, at-large member, introduce a bill, H.R. 200, that passed out of a Republican-controlled House, but no action was taken in the Senate, and it was a Republican-controlled Senate at the time. We did see the Modern Fish Act signed into law late in 2018, which addressed some certain Magnuson-Stevens Act management concerns raised by the rec sector. Rep. Young has reintroduced that MSA bill this Congress last July 2019. But the Democrat House hasn't taken that up, and we haven't seen any movement in the Senate, which is still, as you all know, Republican controlled. So if there's a blue wave and Democrats wind up controlling House, Senate, and the White House, we may see more of an effort to include or to work on a reauthorization bill. It would probably include language that tries to address impacts of climate change and maybe some other more sort of environmental conservation goals. But I think it's important to note that if the Democrats take control of the Senate, their majority is going to be pretty slim. And so if the MSA were to, by some miracle, come to the floor, it may need Republican support depending on what happens to the filibuster. And that could prove difficult depending on sort of how green this bill is. And just Bob may have some thoughts on this, but kind of one final thought is, the MSA has historically been the result of many hours, days, months, years of bipartisan negotiation. But, we've kind of seen that erode as DC has become increasingly partisan. So I think that has contributed to making passage of an MSA reauthorization bill a little more difficult.
Yeah, I would agree. And sitting here on K Street in Washington, at the epicenter of partisanship, that's entirely true. Our international audience might wonder how it is that they're seeing the confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett moving so quickly, and yet we're talking about how difficult it is for legislation to pass. Constitutionally, in our somewhat quirky system, appointments are very different from legislation. Historically, any one senator can put a hold on a bill. Also, Senator Ted Stevens, not Stevenson, Senator Ted Stevens, who the MSA is named after, at the height of his power as a senator from Alaska, was not able to get floor time in the Senate for the 2006 reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. The point I'm making there is that we saw a Republican House unable to get a bill through a Republican Senate. Yeah. Anything that is going to happen on an MSA reauthorization is going to very likely have to go through what is known as unanimous consent, which means it's not debated. There are no objections to it. So by the time it gets to the floor of the Senate, everybody is pretty much okay with it. So until that happens, and I have to give credit to Congressman Jared Huffman. I don't want to confuse Jason Huffman with Jared Huffman. Congressman Jared Huffman,
no relation,
chairman, Chairman Huffman has been reaching out around the country and doing listening sessions on Magnuson-Stevens. He's been very impartial with both how they've been run and the people he's had there. If we can get something if it's a Democratic bill with a lot of bells and whistles and promises for their constituencies, it will probably not make it through the Senate in the same way that HR 200 did not make it through a Republican Senate. So we will see. I would agree with Leigh's observation that it depends more on the House and Senate and what the members do than it does on the outcome of the election in November.
Okay.